All right, welcome to another introduction TLDR tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about SASS. SASS is something I use actually on a daily basis, and I've been growing to love it a little bit more the more I've been diving into styles and CSS. But what is SASS? For those of you new, SASS would define itself as an extension of CSS. I like to think of SASS as a superset of CSS. What I mean by that is it can do everything CSS can and then some. Kind of like how TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. CSS with added functionality, extended functionality. Why use SASS? Well, there are some things that in the past and in the present you can't do in CSS yet. And we want to be able to write a little bit more dynamic CSS and cleaner, in my personal opinion, sometimes cleaner CSS than is available. So we use SASS to handle that. What topics are we going to cover? Well, my goal is always to get you started, right? Any tutorial is no good if you don't know how you can go and start using said language, said framework by the end of it. So we're going to start there. We're then going to cover variables in SASS, mixins, logic operators like if, else, and while, and then the @import. I would say this is about 90 to 95% of what you're going to be using SASS for. Let's go ahead and get started. I want to thank our sponsor, DevMountain. You can check them out at devmountain.com. If you're interested in full stack JavaScript, you should check them out. If you're interested in iOS development, you should also check them out. Salesforce, I would recommend them. Quality assurance, definitely, as well as UI UX. They have 5 different programs. Some are online, some are in person with housing included, so you can get up and go, and some are after hours for those of you who can't just make that full-time commitment and drop everything. Check them out at devmountain.com. All right, so to use SASS, you're going to want to install Node on your computer if you don't already. You can go to nodejs.org/en for the English site and go ahead and download the current or the LTS recommend. It doesn't really matter. You're also going to need a terminal of some sort. I will be using git bash on here, and you can get that from git-scm.com. When you download Git, it'll install git bash here for you as well, or any other terminal that you prefer to use. Now, the first step to get up and running in SASS is go ahead and open up your terminal. I'm just going to use the embedded one here, and let's go and zoom in a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to install globally npm install-g. That's global install, so we only have to do this once. SASS. Again, you're going to need node/npm, but npm comes with node by default now. And it's going to install. It should just take a second here. Very nice. Now that we've installed SASS, which is currently in version 1.8, which apparently they've been working on 12 years, which I found stunning and impressive. Now that we've done that, let's go ahead and create our very first SASS file. We can do that. Uh-oh. I think my thing crashed. Did it crash? Uh-oh. It looks like Visual Studio crashed. All right. I've never had Visual Studio crash on me like that before, but it's all right. We'll keep going. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a styles.scss. This is a SASS file. You might also have seen file names like SASS. That's also a SASS file. I believe SCSS is just sort of the rebranded file tag. I don't know. That's the one I use. And what this will give us, and let's just start by creating some basic stuff, right? And we're not going to have any HTML, but we'll just create this color red, right? We're going to set a H1 to red. Now, what could happen here is what happens when you have a sort of superset or extension of a language like this is you typically will compile it down to, like TypeScript compiles down to JavaScript, and SASS compiles down to CSS. So the way that we can compile that is with the SASS keyword, and we do we don't need that. We can do styles.scss, and you'll see that it's compiling it right here. So we can see what it's actually going to come out as. Now let's see what happens if we do, hey, if an H1 is nested in an H2 and we say color yellow or something like that, and then of course let's move it up like that. We can do the same thing. Oh, let's save it. And you'll see it's going to actually separate it out into compliant CSS, right? So let's talk about our first topic in SASS here, which is nesting. You have the ability to nest items in the past and share those, and you have the ability to nest classes rather, and not classes, IDs, elements in SASS like you would in HTML by having them spaced out like so. The benefit to this, as you'll see in a second, is we have the ability to have multiple values in our items here, and we don't need, and it's easier to see associations. And it crashed again. Oh my goodness. Now, we're going to go over more properties in a second, but instead of just having you see it in the terminal, let's actually have it render to a CSS file so that you can see what's going on. And to do that, we're going to use a extension or a package called node-sass. So we're going to install npm install node-sass, and this should take just a second to go ahead and install this. And this will, I believe, we'll create our package JSON for us like so. See, we have this package lock, and oh, it looks like we may have to npm init real quick. Npm init, and we'll just leave all this stuff in here. And I want to install node-sass real quick just to add it to as a dependency, even though it should just already be. So we should have initted this before we got started here. But you'll see we have this dependencies file, and our only dependency really is node.json, and then a little bit about what this project is about. What we're going to do here is we are going to add some stuff to the scripts section, which doesn't exist, so that we can say, hey, run this command, and then go ahead and compile this to CSS. All right, now that we have this set up, what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and in the script section, we're going to add this SCSS script. And then we're going to add this big part right here. Let's use double quotes. So what we're going to say is node-sass, which is the installation that the package we just installed. We're going to say watch all our SCSS files and compile them and output it to CSS. That's really what's going on here. All right, now that we have all of our, we have our scripts set up here, what we're going to do is in our, let's see, clear. Let's go ahead and clear this. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to actually run that script. npm run, and then followed by the script, right? This is just standard npm stuff. SCSS. And so this, no such file or directory. Oh, I forgot to create our SCSS file. So let's go ahead and create a new folder here, SCSS, and we can go ahead and move this into here. So basically, it's going to compile all of the stuff. I think this should solve it. Excellent. Let's see if we make a change here, if it'll trigger it. To H3, color blue. So, all right, cool. So you see when I changed it here, I was expecting to say it was running or something. But you see when I changed this file in our CSS file, it then compiled this down. It does do this indentation here to kind of show you, hey, this is how it was in the SASS. But you can see here from our nesting that this, hey, H1 then an H2 nested sort of selector, we can do that using nesting in a much more familiar way than we would in perhaps, let's say let's say just CSS, right? CSS, you have all these word selectors. This makes more sense. So now, let's say we have a color of red here, and we want it to cascade downwards. We can set our H1 to have a color red, and then our H2, we can give this a background dash color of, I don't know, blue. And then within that H2, we can say, look, if there's an icon, we want that to have a you know, a size of, let's say an image. If there's an image, we want, not image orientation, we want to have this a size of 200%. And now when we save it and we go to, while we're at it, let's go ahead and make this split screen. You can see here that we are cascading downward these selectors here. And it's very helpful in that aspect. And we don't have to set up all this sort of super complicated selectors. We can just do nesting, which is something that is fairly intuitive. So let's talk about variables in SASS. Now, some of you may be saying, hey, Dylan, didn't they just add variables in? Did I just add variables to CSS? They did. It doesn't work. It works pretty well, but when we're having SASS, when we're using SASS, we don't have to worry about, you know, browsers supporting compatibility issues, and there is one or two limitations with the variables CSS. For the most part, I use CSS variables. I don't have any problem with that. But say we wanted to use SASS and we wanted to have it just compile down to regular CSS, so we don't have to worry about that. It's a great tool that way as well. So here we can go ahead and say maybe we'll do heading dash color, and we want to set all the heading colors to red. And we can take this variable in native CSS, I believe they would call them custom properties. So we can take this custom property, oh my goodness, and we can go ahead and save it. And you'll notice now it will change once it outputs all the values here, because we've now changed this. So if we go in our application and we don't want to change, you know, we don't want to have to go and change everything a million different times, we can have these variables. It doesn't just work for colors. We could do something like heading font size, and we can use this, and we'll say 10px, right? And we can take this and we'll go ahead and say font dash size, and we can assign a variable that way as well. So it's not the only thing that we can do. We can also do something like this, which we could add. We can do math within our with our variables in SCSS, and it says, hey, we know this is 10 pixels, so we want to add 5 to it. So it's very powerful. And variables was probably the number one reason people started picking up these CSS extensions or CSS supersets. So let's talk about Mixins a little bit. The name might have you confused, and when I first heard what a Mixin was, I was like, that's a really stupid name. But basically what a Mixin is a function. It is a way for you to rewrite reusable CSS and to handle it appropriately. So how might we use a Mixin? Well, the way that I like to use them at work is I use them for when I'm working with some items where we're going to need those vendor prefixes, those browser compatibility issues. And so I'll define a Mixin. Let's use BoxShadow as an example, where it's at Mixin. Ooh. And then we're going to name it. I typically like to name it if I'm using a certain, not border radius, I think we said BoxShadow. So if I am using a property, I would like to use that property. That's how I like to roll with it. And so this is a function again, and what we're going to be doing here is we're going to pass in a value, right? So you could have in BoxShadow, right? You're going to have an X coordinate. You're going to have a Y coordinate. You're going to have a blur, and notice how I'm using the dollar signs for all this. And then you're going to be having a see the contrast. I forget what this is. I'm looking at, but it needs 4 values for BoxShadow, and we we're going to handle the vendor prefixes this way. So we do webkit-box-shadow, and one of the cool things about this is now that whenever we're going to be using BoxShadow someplace, we don't have to retype the 3 or 4 vendor prefixes and the default CSS property. We instead can just pass it in like so. Y blur and C, and then we're going to do the same. I'm going to copy this real quick. We're going to do the same thing for the Mozilla vendor prefix. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the Microsoft BoxShadow vendor prefix. And then I'm just going to have the default box-shadow vendor prefix. And now, if we want, now that we've set this up, and you would probably have a file in here called something like, Mixins, some Mixins file. But you could go ahead and use this in a let's say we had a div, and we wanted to have a shadow on that. We could include the box-shadow, and this is our mixin. This isn't the CSS property. Now it's using the BoxShadow CSS property, but then we just pass in, like, I don't know, 10px, 10px, 4px, and then gray for our mixin. And now you'll see, hey, our div has all these properties, and all we had to do was, if we want to use this BoxShadow anywhere else, we don't have to go and define these mixins again and again and again. We can instead just sort of create it one time, and then when we want to use it in our SAS file, we can just include it. All right, so let's talk about partials real quick. So currently we are compiling anything with a SCSS file, and typically you have what's called a partial file, which is a file that an SCSS file, SAS file, where you want to only use it in your other SAS files. There's no real need to compile it because when it gets injected into those SAS files that will be compiled, it'll get compiled there. How do we handle that? What do we do with that? Well, let's see if now I haven't worked too much with this extension, so hopefully it plays by the rules. But I was telling you we might create a mixins, and notice that I have this. Oh, this is in the CSS file. I meant to do it in the SCSS file. So we're gonna create a mixins file here and put a SCSS on it. And what we want to do is we want to go ahead and gut this out and paste it into here like so. And then we also, and you notice how when I saved it, it didn't compile, right? Because of that partial sort of tag on here with the underscore. Now, what we want to do is want to import, use that at import. And what are we importing? Well, we're importing the mixins from the file, and we'll save it here. And you'll notice that we still have access to everything that's going on here, just so that we could see that everything's changing. Let's go ahead and just make this instead of gray, and close that a little bit. Instead of gray, we'll go ahead and make it, I don't know, how does white sound? And you'll notice that it changes there. So this is what's referred to as a partial, and this is how we would import other ones. And I think we could import it like so, but yeah, it doesn't matter. But typically for readability purposes, you just import it like that, because SAS knows that this is a partial and to treat it as such. So yeah, so that's partials. That's how you're going to import from CSS, from your SCSS files. And it's good because it allows us to break out our, eventually we might have a partial variables, we'll have a partial mixins, and it allows us to import a bunch of different properties and organize our CSS in a very organized manner. So let's talk a little bit about logical operators in SAS. We'll jump into our mixins here, and let's say we want to have a certain, I don't know, font color, for instance. So we'll add a mix in here. And typically, this is going to break what I said earlier, which how I like to use it, but this is a tutorial. So maybe we have a mix in called button-colors. And in here, we're going to take in a type. We can actually use an if-else to assign types. So let's say we want to say if type is equal to something, double equals, excuse me, to, we'll use the bootstrap success, right? You know, font-color is green. You know, font-weight is bold. I don't know. You also have an else if, which if you're, you know, familiar with any sort of programming language, it's going to work pretty much how you expect it. Else if it is equal to danger. What is this complaining about? Oh, at else if, excuse me. There we go. So at else if, and then we'll just do, there's no such thing as font color. I've been quite literally typing font color since the day I started doing CSS like 5 years ago. I can't help myself. So color is red, font-weight might be, I don't know, we'll say 500. And then there's also an at else where, you know, if it's none of these values, we'll go ahead and we'll just say, you know, color is gray, something boring. Now, if we go into, let's go ahead and copy this button colors mixin. One thing to keep in mind when you're setting these, you know, values that are you're gonna be passing in is that they can't be named anything that are reserved words for CSS. You know, I've made the mistake in the past of naming things like content in like CSS grid, for instance, and it's broken things, and you're wondering why it's there. So just keep that in mind. So let's say, you know, we want to include our mixin, which we called, you know, button colors, and we said success was 1. All right, so we'll include here success, and then on our H2 here, we'll go ahead and put danger. And then on our H3 here, we'll, I think we'll override it. Let me see here. I don't actually, I imagine it will. So, and then we'll just put no value. Oh, did that break it? Did it not like that? So we'll just put a value that exists. There you go. I think I might have to set a default value. So you can see here that it then assigned the success class in here, and then in the danger class it assigned the danger class, and then in the default, when it failed, it assigned the default value because none of them passed. So I looked this up because I never have actually assigned a default value, and it appears that if we want to, and just so that we can see that it's working, that we can assign a default here of a value, which would be like, we can just call it default, something like that. And I think if we save this, oh no, it doesn't like that. Let me see here. There we go. So when we pass in that else, and it breaks, they're like, okay, well, we've actually added a default value here to catch that. So you can use defaults as well, just kind of to assign it. Now, I don't know if I like that. I feel like I want, you know, I might, I don't know how I feel about that, but it's possible. I guess that's the point I'm trying to say. So let's talk about for loops, right? So for loops are something in SAS that you can use where you can, you know, iterate, create classes dynamically, create property values dynamically. Let's give an example here of what would be a good example. Well, I like Free Code Camp's example, actually. So Free Code Camp gave an excellent example when I was working through it, where they basically showed how to create a like a column grid system with a CSS or SCSS. And so what they defined was you start off with the @for keyword, and then you define your range from 1 through 12, for instance. That's our iterations. We're going to start from 1 and we're going to go to 12. And in here, it's basically going to do whatever we want, really. And so what we want to do is we want to create a column -1, a column -2, all the way up to 12. And so you can actually append values in Sass dynamically using the hashtag curly brace opening closing curly brace. Then we can pass in I. So this would be like .column 1, .column 2, etc., etc. And then in here we can dynamically apply those values. So let's say we want to create the width for our Sass file, and we want to do 100% divided by 12, because this is a, like in Bootstrap, a 12 column grid system. And then we want to times it by, where's our $sign again? I. When we save this, you'll see we'll have this dynamically generated width percentage that extends with it. Column 1, which is about 8.3, all the way to column 12, which will take up 100%. This was an excellent. I don't know who wrote this in Free Code Camp, but this is by far the best for loop example I have seen when it comes to Sass. And you'll see that the index value that we're iterating through is being concatenated on here as expected, and then our multiple is being multiplied on here. So you can do for loops for these items. So you can do this for anything, right? Font size, color, it really just depends, right? I've used it once or twice with color, where we want to increment the colors incrementally in creating a gradient. All right, I think that's about everything I wanted to cover. I showed you how to create variables. I showed you how to name things dynamically. I showed you how to, do for loops, else statements, how to use mixins. I think I mentioned while loops as well. I'm gonna skip over that because I really tend to discourage people from creating while loops in their code in general. But that's something that you can do. But this is about 90% of everything you're gonna need when it comes to Sass and partials, as well as we mentioned with the underscore prefix, to get you up and going. And it's something I've been using in the last year or so, and I've been loving it. And the thing I appreciate most is probably the variable names, as well as the nesting and the mixin. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you found it helpful. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, share, support me on Patreon, check out my courses, hit that notification bell. That's a lot to ask, but I appreciate it if you do it all. And I will see you guys next time. Bye. So I'm Stk. I have a bachelor's in business. I've been wondering if I should get one in computer science. Is that a good idea, or is the fact that I already have a degree, although not web dev related, good enough on a resume for web development? So would a bachelor's in computer science help you? Of course it would. I don't think anybody would say it's not, but it's a big time and money investment. I think you already have the HR check mark, right? What you really need are skills and a portfolio. And you could go and start building that up definitely before 4 years. That would be my recommendation. But would a bachelor's in computer science help you? Of course it would. Would a master's? Of course it would. Is it worth the time, energy, and investment when you already have a bachelor's in business? I would say not. I would say focus on getting the skills, focus on building the portfolio, and then once you're in the workplace and you've put in the time and the energy to get there, perhaps revisit this and see what direction you want to take your career from there. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. Hope you subscribed and hit that notification bell. Check out my latest course, the 100 Algorithms Challenge, where we go through 100 different algorithms in JavaScript and TypeScript so that you can ace your next JavaScript coding interview. You can get it in the description for just $9.99. Check it out. See you next time. Thanks for watching.